everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Her Faith Inspires podcast, where we take cultural issues and align them to biblical truth. I've got an amazing episode for you today, but first, I want to let you know about online Christian courses and a fantastic course coming up on March 7th with Dr. Frank Turek called Jesus versus the Culture. It's a 12-week class, and OCC is where I have received a lot of my certificates in different areas of apologetics. It helps me to defend the faith and be equipped to do that. And I now work for them as a course admin. So if you want to take this course with Dr. Frank Turek and have live Zoom sessions ran by him with him, use my code SHANDA10, SHANDA10 for a 10% discount. You won't regret it. I'm telling you right now that this course is awesome. That he talks about progressive Christianity, social justice, critical theory, you name it. It's a 12-week course. You will love it. Frank is going to go and he's going to help you defend the faith in our current cultural crisis by facing the tough topics of our day. And you can go to onlinechristiancourses.school to enroll and find out more information. There is a sample lesson for you to check out. Okay, so today we are talking about how to survive in a culture of offense. And I mean, have you noticed people are so easily offended over the craziest things? Why do we have cancel culture? Microaggressions, body equality, where, everyone gets a trophy nowadays, and we can go on and on forever about where our culture lies with being or trying to avoid offense. Why do we have those things? Because we're a culture of offense. We've kind of tried to cushion ourselves and cushion our children and cushion the culture from anything that may hurt them or make them feel bad. But why are we so easily offended? Why are people so afraid that to take the offense out of everything? Because we are a self-absorbed, selfie generation. I'm going to expand on that today, and I want to talk about that, what that means for you, what that means for me, and how we survive in a culture of offense. People literally can't deal with even being on social media. I've heard a lot of women say they've had to take a social media break because they compare themselves too much with other people, or they get offended by what other people post. They want to cancel ideas that conflict with their ideas. Is it getting out of hand, or is it just me? I don't think it's just me. I think it's getting out of hand. I think people are starting to notice it. And there is a deeper issue here, and we need to talk about that today. So what is offense? What is an offense? Per the Oxford Dictionary, an offense is an annoyance or resentment brought about by a perceived insult to or disregard for oneself or one's standards or principles. So it's when somebody gets annoyed or has resentment because they feel like they were being insulted. So can you be looked at as an offender because you caused someone to feel upset, annoyed, or resentful? Yes, that's exactly what this means. You can be looked at as the offender, and that's when you can become canceled, or people will look at you and say, you need to be fired from your job, or whatever the case may be. But the question we want to ask today is, well, there's a couple questions, right? Are people easily offended, and why? Secondly, what does it say about you when you're easily offended? And finally, how do we survive in a culture of offense? We're going to get to those questions in a minute, but I want to lay a little more groundwork here before we do. Proverbs 19:11 tells us how we are to handle offenses, because the truth is you've offended people and I've offended people and we've been offended by people. That's life. That's going to happen. But Proverbs 19:11 says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. So one of the attributes we are to have when it comes to offenses is patience, which is a fruit of the Spirit. And then it says it's to the person's glory to overlook an offense. So again, whose glory is it? Well, it's mine. It's the one who is offended. It's yours if you're offended, to overlook the offense. So again, this is telling us how to handle offenses, not to be easily offended. You get the glory when you overlook the offense. And I don't think we've ever looked, I don't really think about that often. When you feel offended, you don't feel like you're getting glory for overlooking it. Our natural response is to want to retaliate or to defend ourselves or to get away from that person. So to overlook means we don't retaliate. It means we don't get revenge. It means we try not to get overly angry at the offender. We let it go. Do you see that attitude in our culture? Do you see that? I don't. This is cancel culture. That's why. You're considered dangerous if what you say doesn't align with the mainstream narrative. You're ostracized, you're cast out, you're canceled. The Bible talks often about offenses. The Bible tells us how to handle offenses. And when we have 6% of the American church with a biblical worldview, you get a culture that is easily offended because we don't know what God says about offenses. Proverbs 18:19 says, "A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle." What does that mean? It means that when somebody is offended and they're close to you and has a close relationship with you, they become stubborn and will hold the grudges. So offenses and being easily offended has a lot to do with pride, unforgiveness, and self-centeredness. Really, when you're easily offended, it's because of pride. You're not easy to forgive, or you don't easily forgive. And it's all about you and how you feel and how that person made you feel. It's a me-centered attitude that cultivates cancel culture, which, microaggressions and all, that's what comes with it. So let's talk about our first question. Are people easily offended, and why? Well, this is going to be, I'm going to lay this out here into the research that I see and what I see going around on different news sources and news outlets. Our colleges are the breeding grounds for some of the most offended and weak-minded young people. And I say that with all sincerity. We are raising people who cannot handle words, ideas that are conflicting with their own ideas, opinions of other people. I mean, this is life here, and they can't handle life. When colleges provide safe spaces for students because they can't handle ideas that they don't agree with, we're fostering an emotionally weak generation. I have one college-age kid. If he gets offended or he can't handle opposing views, it's like I ask him to think critically about the opposing view. How would he tackle that? Not run away from it and need a safe space and cry about it. A few weeks ago, tragically, the Miss USA winner from North Carolina jumped from a building in New York City and she killed herself. And I've read a few articles about posts leading up to her death, and she was struggling with microaggressions and mean people on social media. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a tragedy, and anyone struggling with mental health issues needs to seek out professional help. However, microaggressions can be anything from someone saying your shoes look nice to complimenting your hair. You never know when you may be indirectly or unintentionally offending someone that they label as a microaggression, because that's what a microaggression is. It's micro because it's on a very small scale. The definition of microaggression is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. So with the last year and a half or more of this racial tension in our country, we've started to see more things labeled as microaggressions. Another example given in some of the research that I did, that is in many cases, the aggression can be difficult to pinpoint and resolve because it is not so outright and obvious or even malicious. That was from baker.edu, by the way. They said the microaggression may not even be obvious. It may not even be malicious. It can just be something that somebody thinks is offensive and they call it a microaggression. And that would be valid as long as they're within that minority group. Does that clear it up for you? Because it doesn't clear it up for me. It can be pretty much anything someone deems as offensive, and then all of a sudden you can become or be labeled the offender. And you may not have had any intention of being offensive. So when we build a society of easily offended people who take everything personally or read into it and conclude that it's an offense because you come from maybe the majority of the culture, then we create a society of mentally weak people all around, everyone. Even the offender becomes mentally weak because they don't know what they should say or shouldn't say. Social media has created a culture that needs constant validation through likes, shares, retweets, and snapping back. Society needs those validations to feel valuable. That's where we placed our value and our worth these days. Social media can go both ways. It can be good. It can be bad. It depends upon how you use it, right? I equate that to just like a weapon. It can be used for something that's good or something that has negative consequences. Social media is the same. However, many can't handle it because they are easily offended. And I believe it it too has fostered a culture of offense. Social media has fostered this. We have more access to other people's opinions and ideas, whereas we didn't before social media. It was much more difficult to get information outside of textbooks, educational institutions, and people who took the time to actually write down information with thought-provoking ways to articulate and communicate with other people, because they were literate and critical thinkers. Now we just have any Joe Schmo who can make a social media account and pretend that he knows everything, and his ideas are all over because he has a platform. Now, that doesn't mean that all literature and ideas, back then were sound. Of course they weren't. But at the same time, it takes effort and thought to write books and publish your ideas. So it wasn't just, like I said, any Joe Schmo who was able to throw opinions out there, yet social media has provided that. And along with that has provided more of a culture of offense. And this is where I want you to hear me. If we can become offended on the micro level, such as social media and microaggressions and things that you can't really label as wrong or can't really label as an offense, we're going to do that on the macro level. If we do not wrestle with this and control it now, what's the macro level? Being offended by truth, real truth, when it hurts. And trust me, we all know that truth hurts at times. God's words are useful for correction and reproof, and that never feels good. So if we are easily offended when it doesn't matter, when it's small things, we will take offense at anything. A few weeks ago, many of you probably know, Joe Rogan was being boycotted by some, old people, to be honest with you, on Spotify that I never even heard of before this whole fiasco. And they used to sing and all that because they were offended by his previous comments that discussed COVID-19. Now, whatever you think about his comments, it is what it is. But the White House came out with statements that said the information is dangerous. Why is somebody's words, why are they dangerous? Because we live in a culture of offense now where words have become dangerous. And I don't listen to Joe Rogan, to be honest with you. I don't listen to him, but I also hate it when people try and stifle somebody else's ideas or words, no matter if I agree with them or not, because that's a dangerous society. When it's not a good society to live in. I also don't like it when people insult my intelligence by pulling the ideas of someone else off of the shelf because they think I or you or anyone else can't make their own decisions by weighing information. That takes critical thinking out of culture. And that alone is offensive, to be honest. So is our culture easily offended? Yes. And we see why is because when you see the consequences of them trying to control language, then you see that it's a culture of offense. And it seems to get more, worse and worse every day. So what does it say about you when you're easily offended? So now that we looked at culture, we evaluated some of the things going on in college campuses, social media, and looking at, how our culture is a culture of offense. What does it say? Let's bring it home and talk about when it offends us, when we get easily offended. There are 3 things being easily offended says about you. Now, get me, okay? Everyone will get offended at times. I'm not talking about, getting offended over things that are hurtful or whatever. I'm not saying no one will ever be offended or offend. I get offended. I just gave an example of when I am offended, when people insult my intelligence. But how often are you offended? Are you offended by what we would call microaggressions? Does speech bother you so much that you have to shut off the social media because, you can't stand looking at somebody else's posts because they offend you? I remember a few years ago, here's a personal story. I gave a pair of pants to a friend and they were a size 8 and I wore them when I was pregnant. And once I lost the baby weight, I passed the pants on to my friend because that's the size that she wore. Well, a few months went by and she finally let it all out about how she was offended that I gave her the size 8 pants and said that after I gave them to her, she went into the bathroom and cried about it because it hurt her feelings because she thought I was insinuating that she was fat. Well, first, a size 8 is not fat at all. And second, I never had one thought that she was fat, like at all. I was very surprised by the whole thing and really thought I was just giving her my pants that didn't fit me anymore. I had no idea that what I did or even how how to do it differently in the future. Like looking back on that situation, I thought, how could I do this differently if I ever had, to give somebody a pair of pants that were their size, and I didn't know how to do it even differently. The only thing I knew to do from that point forward is to never give her clothing anymore, because I wouldn't want her to be offended over something I was never trying to be offensive, to her in the first place. So she didn't want that from me because of how I made her feel. So what's my point? If you're easily offended and you get your feelings hurt all the time, you don't get offended occasionally. You have a victim mentality. When people just say, well, that's just how I feel and you should accept it because you hurt my feelings, there are some times when people's hurt feelings aren't even valid. So you don't have to validate every hurt feeling just because somebody feels hurt over them. Sometimes we need to toughen up. Sometimes we need to say, I shouldn't get my feelings hurt all the time. And that's why I want to talk about the victim mentality. A victim mentality affects how you see yourself and how you see others when they interact with you. Those with the victim mentality never take ownership or responsibility. They often put the blame on someone else, or they always have an excuse for why they did what they did. This ties in well into being easily offended because the person thinks he's the victim and everyone else is the offender and needs to change so that they are not offended again. It doesn't work. It doesn't work though. The person with the victim mentality will continue to find offense because they see themselves as the victim. Thus the reason for microaggressions. They take offense where none was given. So that's what the first thing we need to ask ourselves. Are we easily offended, or does our feelings always get hurt? Do we see an offense in everything because we're all the ones who are always offended and somebody else is always the offender? Second, a person who is easily offended is a grudge holder and unforgiving. When we are offended, it is because someone has hurt us. And like I said, that's going to be valid in a lot of cases where we're offended. That means someone has deliberately done something to cause hurt. And that's hard. That's very difficult. I believe our culture has confused offense, though, because we take everything personally, especially when people don't agree with us or, if they have differing views. Ephesians 4:26 tells us not to let the sun go down on our anger. That means not to stew over offenses and not to allow the bitterness to take root. So why all of the offended people today? Why, if we're easily offended, it could, being in this culture of offense could affect us if we're not careful and cause us to take offense with everything when we hear cancel culture. And, if they said something that made me angry, I just won't talk to them anymore. But I believe we have to be careful because it's what Paul told Timothy that would happen in the last days because of the mentality and the hearts of the people. And he said this in 2 Timothy 3. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Being easily offended means we lack love for the other person, which means we are putting ourselves first. And there you have lovers of self, like Paul was telling Timothy, which means we also have pride, which also means that we don't forgive, which means that we don't love. It's a domino effect here. When we put ourselves first, the worst of us comes out, and we do not, because we cannot love our neighbors like we love ourselves. So we will not overlook offense. It is hard to overlook offense. When you feel hurt, that's the last thing you want to do. When you are betrayed, that's the last thing you want to do. Trust me, I am in the boat with you. But I also do not want to blend in with culture and be a person who's easily offended. That is not a healthy way to live life. And finally, being easily offended means we are earthly minded and not eternally minded. Where is the focus when we're easily offended? Again, it's on self. 1 Corinthians 13:5 says that love is not easily provoked or offended. So I want to reread that. Love is not easily provoked. So it's not easy to be offended, and it's not easy to offend, to be provoked or offended. That means we do not have God's view of love in mind if we are easily offended. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12:10, "For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Now, Paul is, he's an anomaly, really. We can use Paul as an example all the day long, but it's kind of like, I'm not equating Paul to Jesus here. I'm not going to do that. But I am saying, when I look at Jesus's life and I say, "Oh Lord, help me to be like you," I look at Paul and I say, "Oh Paul." Well, I don't say, "Oh Paul." I say, "Oh Jesus." Hopefully I can also be like Paul. Paul even knew when he said, "Hey, emulate me as I emulate Christ." I mean, he must have known he could fight through the offense well when he wrote, "I am content with weakness and insults." Really? Like, who's content with weakness and insults and hardships and persecutions and calamities? None of that was good. For me, if I was writing this, I'd be like, I'm really content with rest, with getting my nails done, with, sitting on my couch and having my kids brush my hair. I'm content with those things. But the hard things like weakness and insults and hardships and persecutions and calamities, I'm not content with that stuff. That's difficult. But how can you say you're content with insults? I surely can't give you the answer to that because I'm working on arriving to that point myself. Because like I said, that's hard. But I can tell you that we all must strive to be content with insults, knowing that as we live for Christ, we will offend others by the life that we choose to live. And again, Paul was able to say, "Emulate me as I emulate Christ," because he disciplined himself in such a way that he was able to have this attitude towards insults. And we live in a culture of offense that fosters, my feelings were hurt and I'm insulted, and cancel culture. When we're easily offended, our focus is on ourselves, which is earthly minded. When we let offenses go because we know our purpose is to live for Christ, it's easier to let them go because we're eternally minded. So we just got to put our focus in the right place. And that brings me to my final point today. You guys probably going to hear my little puppy. My husband got me a puppy and she's out there barking. But that brings me to my final point. How do we survive in a culture of offense? We have to first understand where we are and be honest with the situation that we're in. We've arrived at a place where everyone is easily offended and we can become a part of cancel culture. Okay, that's where we are. If we don't embrace that, and yes, I said embrace it, then we will not survive. We cannot lie to ourselves and think that we'll be liked because we're Christians. We won't be. There are going to be people who, and I guarantee you there are people who's listened to my podcast and actually absolutely hate it and think I'm the biggest idiot in the world. So I'm thankful for you guys who leave positive reviews on iTunes. So, thank you for that, or send me messages. It keeps me going. But let's not deceive ourselves. In Matthew 16:26, Jesus asked, "What does it profit a man if he gains the world and loses his soul?" How do we gain the world? By trying to be accepted by the world, by trying to align our convictions up to theirs. It's never going to happen. Yeah, it can also be running after the world and chasing the pleasures of this life, but it also happens because we want to be liked and accepted by society. Jesus said in John 15:18, "If the world hates you, know that it hated me first." He said this to us so it would encourage us. Like, hey, if the world hates you, just know this, it hated me first. The world hated Jesus. Why did the world hate him? Because he spoke the truth and they rejected it. Think about that. Think about it. When we want to be accepted by the world, it's not going to happen, because if they crucified Jesus, the one that you serve, why would they like you? Why would they like me? I can't part, the waters and make people walk on water and all that kind of stuff. I can't take loaves and fish and multiply it. So Jesus did a lot more than I did, and because he was God, and there's no way me not being God and me just being a regular old, person on this earth, they're not going to like me. Do you think they're not going to reject you and me too? They will. Even if there wasn't cancel culture, even if we didn't live in this culture of offense, they would still reject us because of what we stand for and because we live in the world. The Bible is always countercultural, and so are God's people. So first things first, know what time you're living in and embrace the fact that you won't be liked. Secondly, don't play the game. If you don't play the game, no one is going to checkmate you. You can't lose the game if you're not playing it. And what do I mean by that? Be you and speak truth. Be consistent. Also, don't cancel or smear the opposing view. Keep your cool. We must look different than the world, and that doesn't only mean when we're speaking truth. Like, oh, I identify Shanda because she speaks truth. No, but it's also how I respond to those who don't. It's also how you respond to those who don't agree with you. Do you know how many times I want to call people stupid idiots when they say something like men can be women? Like, what are you thinking? But if I ever start to type something and before I hit post, I tell myself, nope, take it off, shut it down, Shanda. That is not a good representation of Jesus. And thank God the Holy Spirit is there telling me, So don't play the game. Engaging in cancel culture is a trap. Speak the truth, keep your cool, and stand firm. And finally, don't apologize. Nothing irritates me more than when people speak the truth and either retract it or apologize for it later. Weak, scared, intimidated, bowing to the mob, it never works. No one wants to hear you say you're sorry when you speak the truth, especially those who love the truth right along with you. The people who applauded you for speaking it are disappointed, and the people who are offended because you spoke it don't care. They want you canceled. And this reminds me of this verse where people heard the truth about Jesus, knew he was the Son of God, but would not join him, would not become his disciple because they, as John 12:43 says, love the praises of men more than the praises of God. When we love the praises of men, we will bow to the mob and apologize that the truth offended them. This only hurts your message. It only shows weakness. And when there's blood in the water, the sharks are only coming to devour. So stand firm. Don't apologize for speaking the truth. To be offended, easily offended, is a terrible place to be easily offended. It's a place of unhappiness. Again, the victim mentality is the one who sees everything as an offense and every person as the offender. The Bible tells us that love is not easily offended. I was thinking about this verse a few weeks ago, and it's from 1 Peter 4:8, and it says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. We're in a culture of offense because love is lacking. Real God-defined love is lacking. And I actually did an episode on love, how God defines love in episode 116. And why is that? Why is, we hear so much about love in our culture, but and loving others and all that, but it's not working. Why is it not working? Because you cannot truly love without God because he is love. And you cannot truly love without God because you have to love him first in order to truly and properly love other people the way that he wants you to. When we love others, we overlook a lot of things because of our love for them and because of our love for God. Love covers a multitude of sins. It hides them. It doesn't disclose them or go tell others about them or tell others about the offense and slander them. This is the verse I try to remember when I do get offended. Because if I hold the grudge or can't forgive or run and tell other people about how this person has wronged me, I'm the one who's unloving. I'm the one who doesn't get the glory because I'm the one who's easily offended. And this is something I pray that we learn to live out and set an example for. It's not easy. I always try to be honest with you guys and tell you when I struggle and where I struggle. And I'll just be honest, this is not easy, but I love the Lord and I want to be known by how I treat other people because I love God first. And we must learn to work at this and not be a part of culture, especially a part of this cancel culture. And as we live this life, with the guidance and direction of the Holy Spirit, with the word of God leading the way, correcting us and reproving us and showing us the way that he wants us to live under a biblical worldview, we will be different, not just by what we say, but how we respond to other people when they don't agree. And so I hope that this message, this episode helped you understand how to survive in a culture of offense. And really, we may look at other people and how they handle it, but when it comes down to it, it starts with me and you. It's where it always starts. I was telling my baseline apologetics group the other day, it's called a ripple of influence because it starts with me and it ripples out beyond my home into my community, and it goes further and beyond the town and the state and then the nation. We don't always see that. We can't see it. It's impossible. We're one person with the perspective that we have, because we're finite people. But if you want to make a difference, it starts with you, because the ripple of influence starts with where you are and it goes beyond you. If my ripple of influence was only social media and the podcast, then I'm not doing a good job, because it starts here in my home first and goes beyond. And how we handle offenses and how we respond to other people will bring glory to God and glory to ourselves if we can overlook the offense. And that's exactly what God wants. So I hope that helped you. You can survive this culture of offense. Do not apologize for speaking truth. Stand on it. Be slow to speak and quick to listen. And I'll catch you on the next one.